Hello, I'm Tom Hilston. Tokal College and the Department of Agriculture have good news for 75% of the state's farmers looking for tertiary management skills. They've released a new program designed to allow the farmer to assess his financial position now and in the future without ever once having to leave the farm.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6. The future of Morisset Hospital is once again up in the air following the Liberals' triumphant rise to power. As promised during the election campaign, the Richmond scheme is under review and none of the 9 fifth schedule hospitals earmarked for closure can be disposed of, including Morisset. In the past, plans to shut the hospital prompted strong protests from many residents of the town. They've now won a reprieve. The hospital will definitely remain open.
And we had good
question
agreement that there was a need to get onto that rapidly. We had our first meeting today with union and management and myself to start looking at the ways we should go about planning the future of mental health services right across the region, including Morisset. And we had some really positive comments being made, so I'm most pleased.
Now, it's definite that Morisset will not close. At this stage, is there any indication what it will be used for?
No, that'll be determined by the government's review. We have some definite ideas of which we believe Morisset could be used to care for people in the most appropriate setting. Now, we'll be putting that to the review when it comes around, and I've no doubt they'll be listening to us and make the decision in the future.
The Greiner government has also stopped the controversial buying up of residential properties for use as community cottages. The new government's mental health policy favours residential options on existing hospital sites.
The Swansea Bridge was a major issue in the recent state election. Ivan Welsh maintained throughout the whole campaign that the new low-level duplicate bridge was a farce that would be unable to handle the region's traffic in future years. He says the Deputy Premier Wal Murray came to the region during the election campaign and promised to hold an inquiry into the bridge if the coalition was swept to power. Mr Welsh plans to hold him to his word and has written to the New South Wales government calling for an inquiry and asking that work halt on the bridge in the interim.
Now, I take that to mean that he was serious about it and that we should have an inquiry. I've written to him and I've asked him for that inquiry. And while the inquiry is pending, I've asked that the work stop on the bridge. It's anomalous to us that the work continues while the inquiry is impending.
Ivan Welsh is determined to try to stop the bridge from going any further. He's pushing for either a tunnel or a high-level bridge. He says a consortium of some of Newcastle's top construction companies are keen to examine in detail the feasibility of building a high-level bridge on the new pillars.
But trying to have something that's realistic being built, we'd like to see a high level or a tunnel, one or the other, but not a duplication of some horse and cart bridge that was put there in 1957.
Tonight in the news, a winter warning on the risks associated with combustion stoves and heaters. An insurance company claims house fires resulting from the appliances have risen by 500% in the past 3 years.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
The tragedy unfolded on a lonely stretch of road at 12 Mile Creek, north of Raymond Terrace. A family of 4 was travelling home to Greystanes in Sydney from Port Macquarie. They had been on an extended Easter holiday. Travelling in a car behind was the brother of the driver. Shortly after 5 o'clock, about a kilometre before the Buckets Way joins the Pacific Highway, police say the family car hit a large pothole.
39-year-old Gasson Haddard lost control. The 1983 Ford Falcon sedan skidded along the gravel shoulder of the road and crossed to the wrong lane before plummeting down an embankment and overturning. 8-year-old Sally Haddard was killed instantly. Her 3-year-old brother, who was strapped in a restraint, escaped without injury. The infant's parents were rushed to the Royal Newcastle Hospital. Their 34-year-old mother, Layla, has since been discharged. Their father remains in a stable condition. The Accident Investigation Squad is waiting to speak to Gasson Haddard to establish whether or not the little girl was wearing a seatbelt. Police say they are satisfied the driver was not speeding. They say the road was in poor condition because of heavy rain during the past week. The Department of Main Roads today said the section of road is under the care and control of Port Stephens Shire Council and that its construction and maintenance is the Council's responsibility. Council says the road had been repaired just before Easter. After last night's tragedy, a gang was sent out to patch up the pothole. This morning, road crews carried out more repair work. But Shire President Innes Crichton says it's an uphill battle. Are you satisfied with the condition of the road?
Unfortunately, no. It's the same as many of the other roads in the Shire. It does require attention, but it's a matter of priorities and money.
So at the moment, you're just able to maintain the road rather than improve it?
Well, I don't think we're really maintaining it. We've got $30,000 to spend on the whole of that road, whereas in fact that one section would cost $50,000, so we're not really maintaining it.
The recount in Charlestown went on well into last night before it was announced officially that Richard Face's winning margin was now 63 votes. Liberal candidate Judith Lloyd said she was disappointed with the result, but would not be challenging further and would continue to work for the people of the area. Mr Face was at a caucus meeting in Sydney today, but his comments after the initial count left him just 3 votes up were still applicable.
The situation is that I will just have to try to consolidate if it's possible, and I'm sure that is. I couldn't have worked, I believe, any harder than I have in the last 15 and a half years, contrary to what some say that I may not or may have achieved certain things. I certainly have spent all that time, 7 days a week, in various things in my electorate, including my electoral duties, and I'll just go about doing those same things in that same manner.
The victory for Bob Martin in Port Stephens means that for the present the ALP has won 6 of the 9 seats in this immediate area. The Liberal Party 1, Cessnock, and Independents 2, Swansea and Newcastle.
Adam John Ralph disappeared from his home on Harlow Street, Belmont North at 5 o'clock yesterday morning. Detectives believe there is more to the case than a simple runaway.
On that particular day, yesterday, he was aware that he and his family were travelling to Sydney to see their grandmother, his grandmother. And the boy is very fond of his grandmother, and it's quite out of character for him to go missing and not participate in the family trip to Sydney.
Adam Ralph wasn't the only person to go missing that morning. 47-year-old Maxwell Roy Green of Belmont North was last seen at his home at 5 o'clock on the same day. Police are equally puzzled by this disappearance.
There's been no suggestion in the past that he's unhappy at home, so we believe that it's completely out of character for him also.
Maxwell Roy Green of Belmont North was last seen at his home at morning. Detectives believe there is more to the case than a simple runaway.
On that particular...
Black Dyke Mills Band, to give it its full name, was formed by John Foster of the Black Dyke Farm in Yorkshire, England in 1837.
151 years later, the band has 25 British Open championships, 18 nationals, 7 European titles and an international reputation to its name. Although the musicians have changed, tour organisers say the band maintains its high standards, as most brass players consider it an honour to be selected to join. The all-male amateur band is in Australia for 2 weeks to take part in bicentennial celebrations. With Newcastle and Wollongong, its only stops outside Sydney. Following tonight's concert, the band plays once more in Sydney before flying home to defend its title at the European Brass Band Championships. Commander of the Tactical Fighter Group is one of the most important positions in the Australian Defence Force. The group, which has its headquarters at Williamtown, controls all assets relating to the fighter defence of the country, covering Williamtown, Amberley and Darwin. The role has recently been expanded by the introduction of the FA-18 Hornets and the construction of a multi-million-dollar base at Tyndall in the Northern Territory. For the past 16 months, control of the Tactical Fighter Group has been in the hands of Air Commodore Dennis Robinson, an appointment which ended today. The Air Commodore is moving to Canberra to take up a position as Director General of Defence Force Development and was farewelled in traditional Air Force style. The Tactical Fighter Group will now be commanded by Air Commodore Trevor Richardson. As his last official duty, Air Commodore Robinson inspected the almost 1,000 air personnel in the only practical way. In Canberra, Air Commodore Robinson will be making recommendations to the Defence Minister on the structure and distribution of the Defence Forces. He says a priority will be attacking the problem of skilled personnel leaving the Air Force.
Certainly I will make my views known, and certainly we have a critical problem in expertise and experience. And until we can get that problem under control, we will not have the combat effectiveness which the taxpayer ought to be expecting.
Air Commodore Robinson is also outspoken on the future of the Mackie jet trainers, several of which have been involved in mishaps in the past months.
I would see a requirement to dispose of the Mackie and acquire an aircraft more suited to the introductory fighter role for which we use the Mackie here, and I would, my own personal view would be that we ought to dispense with the Mackie as a basic training aircraft.
And will you be pushing for that? The 9-metre yacht was on a voyage to Newcastle from Broken Bay and lost both sails, and its engine failed in the 5-metre swell and 40-knot winds. The crew sent out a distress call which was picked up by the Swansea Coast Guard. As the Newcastle police launch was at Nelson Bay, the Coast Guard notified the MSB, which dispatched 2 pilot vessels to tow the yacht into the harbour. It took 3 hours to secure a line, 2 of them breaking under the enormous strain of the swell. One eventually held and the yacht was taken safely through the heads. The yacht was crewed by Arthur Manning and his son Brett. Both escaped injury, although Arthur says they expected to lose their boat.
We were being driven onto the Stockton beach. We avoided it twice, looked as though we'd still pick it up the third time, but the pilot vessel was finally able to get a line onto us, and with some difficulty that was, and we did gradually make our way in safely.
And very happy to be safely back in the harbour.
Very happy to be safely back in the harbour, and with no real major damage done.
The row is over these, or rather the empty spaces where they should be. Demountable classrooms are an integral part of most high schools. They're a relatively inexpensive answer to the problem of enrolments which fluctuate from year to year. When not needed at one location, they can be transported to more needy schools. But cost saving has its price, one which Glendale High School is now paying. Last year, the school estimated its enrolment would drop to 860 this year, and consequently 4 of its demountables were removed. Instead, however, enrolment is up to 911, enough for the school to require 2 more classrooms. Although Glendale has been given the highest priority in the region, the demountables have still not materialised. The result, an acute shortage of teaching areas. For the past term, English, maths and history classes have been held wherever there is space, including metalwork rooms.
I mean, look at these students behind me. I mean, they've got to stand up, write notes. I've got to talk over the noise next door. Now, that's only one class. Now, this is happening almost every lesson. We have 40 lessons a week, and that's happening almost every lesson.
Brian Deller is History Master and Teachers Federation representative at Glendale. He says the teachers and students have battled the conditions long enough. Yesterday, the teachers held a stop-work meeting and decided that from today no more lessons will be taught in rooms which are considered unsuitable. Department of Education District Inspector Laurie Tibbard says the demountable delay is due to a combination of increased enrolments across the state and poor weather preventing their delivery. He says 2 demountables have now been located for Glendale and denies that the teachers' industrial action has had any effect. Mr Tibbard says the Department of Education has done all it could.
You can always find fault, but fundamentally I think there has been a combination of circumstances here of an unexpected total increase in enrolment, of a series of problems in the actual weather here at the school that have caused us to reach this situation at the moment, which is not a satisfactory one.
Miners Federation delegates representing 45 hunter mines attended a meeting this morning. Topics considered included the effect of the current price negotiations with the Japanese on job security in the Hunter Valley. Delegates resolved to call on the federal government to protect coal industry jobs by abandoning deregulation. They also want a minimum $5 per tonne increase from the Japanese, not the $2.90 currently being negotiated. Jeff Brown of the Miners Federation says delegates are warning the government to ensure prices are equitable or action will be taken in the traditional manner.
If there is not a substantial increase, and previous indications from the Japanese markets have been between $5 and $7 US, then we face another period where there could be drastic retrenchments within the industry.
What if nothing is done to make the prices higher?
Well, we're hoping something will be done, but we've indicated to the federal government if it is their desire not to intervene, then we will have no alternative but to possibly have stop-work meetings to resolve our position and decide what action we're going to take from here on in.
During the meeting, delegates also called for the establishment of a national coal authority. Meanwhile, BHP Chairman Sir James Balderston has warned the government to stay out of export coal pricing. He says market forces will iron out any problems, and while admitting the latest coal price is disappointing, says the government shouldn't be tempted into price and export controls. He says the only way to achieve higher prices in the short term would be to withhold supply, in which case he says the longer-term loss of market share could be a very high price to pay.
McDaniel came to Australia in January 1983. He had been playing for Cal State University when he was recruited by the Adelaide 36ers. He stayed with Adelaide for 1 season, moving to Geelong for 2, and is now into his 3rd season with the Newcastle Falcons. In December 1985, he became an Australian citizen, and under international rules, must be a citizen for 3 years to qualify to play for the Australian Boomers. If he had gained citizenship 4 months earlier, he would have more than likely made the Australian team for the Seoul Olympics.
I mean, I'm probably eligible next year to make the Australian team, but I haven't really thought about it, you know. I just want to keep improving and get as better as I can, improve as many areas of my game as I can, you know, and I think this year Ken's really helped me in that area.
Do you ever think you maybe should have took up citizenship maybe 6 months earlier than you would have qualified for the Olympics this year?
No, when I took out my citizenship, I didn't think about, you know, playing for the Australian team. And then it so happened that, Lindsay Gaze informed me that I'd be eligible at a certain year. So I said, well, that's great if it happens. If it happens, if it doesn't, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. So.
We have a 3-on-2 good pass from Brian Victor Wayne. Set at 2 points and triple the bar tonight.
He's one of the nation's most outstanding players.
Injury that I know
Despite
of,
having a communications degree, Wayne is a full-time basketballer and doesn't plan on retiring for at least another 5 to 7 years.
I think I said earlier in the season, gets the ball and sometimes he's reluctant to give it 87. Rethinks he'll get a plane ticket back.
And settle permanently.
Wayne McDaniel.
Last year you had hair, this year you've got a bald head. Is that to intimidate the opposition?
Not really, no. I just woke up and it was all on the pillow. I've done that since college actually, and just shaved my head, and it's comfortable and it's good. There's no sort of emotional aspect involved in it.
This is one of many similar sites now confronting vegetable growers in the Lower Hunter. Hundreds of hectares of crops, many which were due to be harvested, lie rotting in waterlogged fields, ruined not by floodwaters but by too much rain. One of the worst hit in the East Maitland area is Raymond. Ray estimates he's lost all of his 80,000 cabbages and consequently much of his income until he can harvest again in several months.
Well, I think the cabbage we've got in there, we've lost, I'd say, nearly every cabbage there, which could have amounted to about $25,000 worth of produce. And the collies, there's going to be a considerable lot of collies lost. I wouldn't like to venture as to what they would be worth.
Ray says more than 200 millimetres of rain has fallen on his 24 hectares in the last 2 weeks. And even if the rain stops now, he says there is little chance of salvaging any of his cauliflowers, broccoli or potatoes.
Well, if you get the hot weather, this can affect them adversely also. It'll get steamy and they will deteriorate just as fast. You'll see them sort of deteriorate overnight then, and they'll be standing up one day and collapse the next morning.
And a shortage of vegetables here will of course mean a shortage
You're
here.
also having
Secretary Manager of the Newcastle Regional Markets, Peter Holmes, says although some price rises will occur immediately, it is too early to assess the full impact the shortages will make. But there is some relief in sight for growers affected by the rain. Under a package announced by the Premier last week, primary producers who lost produce through the floods could apply for loans of up to $40,000 at 6% interest through the State Bank. Today his department said the Premier was now also seeking the same terms for producers affected by storm damage, covering such cases as Raymond's.
In tonight's news at 6, the Newcastle Rugby League Board is to make an official complaint to the New South Wales Rugby League on referee Mick Stone after last night's Panasonic Cup match in Sydney. Despite a penalty count against them of 18-6, the Knights were victorious 18-2.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
25 years ago, a group of Italian migrants formed the Hamilton Azzurri Soccer Club. A year later, they were admitted to the Northern New South Wales 3rd Division, winning the premiership. The next year, they were victorious in the 2nd Division, and since 1966 have been one of the leading teams in the Northern 1st Division. In 1973, the club changed its name after amalgamating with the Highfields Bowling Club. Since then, the Bowls Club has disappeared, but the soccer club has prospered, winning 3 First Division titles and 1 club championship. Most of the club's original committee and players from 1963 will be among the 250 guests at tomorrow night's reunion, including Basil Rufo, who along with his family were the driving force behind the club's formation. elephants made their
In the
second
news
appearance
tonight,
of the
Ian
day
Botham
at
and
the
his
border
elephants are
crossing
now in
into
Italy
Italy,
on their
having
trek
been
in the
driven up the
footsteps of Hannibal. The trek, like
Local
others made
militia
by
in fact,
Botham,
the
is to
centre of
raise money
attention
for
was not
charity.
Ian Botham.
For all
Once
the
again,
news,
the elephant.
join us tonight at 6.